Hi guys. Um, First of all, I'd like to say apologies for the delay in the start of this. Let me just turn this up. Just the slight delay that we had in the start of this presentation due to a small technical challenge that we had, but I'm glad it's now sorted out. So yeah. Let's jump straight into it. My name is Last Post from Mufoya. It's an honor to be invited by the Zimbabwe Institute of Geoinformatics, the Youth Network, to make this presentation, which I hope by the end of the day it will impact any other practitioners out there, the youth, aspiring practitioners, and even people actually practicing in the field exactly, from the different fields that we actually have all around the world, that is. So yeah, like I said, my name is Last Post from Mufoya. Currently a GI specialist, and I'm practicing with Medicine Sans Frontiers, or Doctors Without Borders, as some of you might actually know it to be. For my tertiary education, I did an honors in geoinformatics and surveying. So the usual question that I always face when I'm in the field or whenever I introduce myself is how is it that a geosciences specialist is actually in the medical field? So hopefully by the end of this presentation, I will have managed to open your eyes to maybe the types and different types of ways in which geospatial sciences actually interact with the rest of the world. And as I mentioned from the title, basically, it's how it applies, how geospatial sciences and techniques actually apply to humanitarian work. So, I think by definition, geographical information systems, GIS, as most of you know it, I think you've all come to be familiar with the term that GIS is just but a tool. And basically that's it, right? That's why it fits into so many realms. And probably we've met the idea of GIS, but in different circles of life. So for this instance, we'll talk of GIS from the humanitarian work and emergency planning point of view. My focus will be based on the experience that I've acquired with my stint, in my short stint with Doctors Without Borders. Just a small background of myself. When I graduated from the University of Zimbabwe with honors in geoinformatics and surveying, like I mentioned before, then I worked briefly with a private survey institute, Geospatial Mapping Services, for about half a year. Then I joined NSF in 2016 up until now. That's where I actually am. So yeah, that's about 3 years. And it is from the experience that I've acquired within these 3 years that I'll try to share my experiences with you guys, and hopefully we can get to have a better understanding of how GIS works with can be applied in other fields. So yeah, like I said, GIS is Geographical Information Systems is just a tool. It's a tool that can be used for many applications. It can be used in doing specific tasks and different tasks, and in aiding you to achieve your goals at the end of the day. I think I'll just give this small illustration of a tool that we always use each and every day. Is a spoon. A spoon can be used to stir your cup of coffee, sugar, put some sugar, eat your rice, etc. But it's still that one spoon. Similar to GIS, GIS can be used for multiple things: engineering, planning, uh, logistics, etc. Many applications. Basically, the analysis that we actually draw from GIS is quite huge. But for now, I'll just stick myself. I'll stick to the humanitarian work and emergency planning. So during my work with this organization, I've tried to apply my skills into different projects and different aspects wherein we carry our work. And some of the applications that I found GIS to be very useful is when we try to determine the settlement density. You know, as an organization, we're a medical organization, and that's where we actually primarily are worked. And we would want to access people to allow people to be able to access medical care and their medication into the greatest of all impacts. So the issue of population is one key issue that you would definitely want to have an analysis to find out of uh, how are the people distributed, how the population is distributed. And so it's GIS, it's the beauty of GIS is that you are able to assign coordinates and to georeference any form of data that you actually have, be they reports, text, anything that you actually can have, can give it the other dimension, that is the position dimension. And once data is now positioned, then this means that you can see the geographical relationship that exists between data that you're actually observing. You see, like one of the most common things that I've encountered in the medical field is that you're usually presented. Let's say, for example, there's an outbreak that you actually have. The outbreak that actually comes, the first thing that you're going to get is basically a line list of data, usually patients' data that you actually have, and you'd get a list of all the patients that have actually been reported and they are sick and they've checked into the health facilities, and you actually want to see how they are distributed at signs. But you know, with an Excel sheet and line list, is basically a line list. You you can sometimes not see the trends and patterns of how they are geographically positioned, these people, and from where is the source of the outbreak, basically. So this is where GIS actually comes in handy, because at the end of the day, you're actually able to visualize the location of these points. And why is it helpful to visualize the location of patients? Is because if you can actually see how they are distributed. You can map out to see how they are distributed, the patients, and you do the same map for cumulatively over a given period of time. You can actually be able to monitor the growth. If it's an outbreak, you can see the trends, how it's progressing. How is it spreading actually with when you add the dimension of time to it, to the data that you actually have. So in other words, GIS, it gives you another eye to how data is presented. You can present data in another format. And now that you actually can present data and you can visualize it, because like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. You can get interpretation, different types of interpretation. That's when you can actually have the issue of trends. You can make a trends analysis to see if there's any trends, any particular trends that you can actually observe from that data. Now that it's now there's the geographical aspect being displayed on a piece of paper. Maybe it's a map or a hard copy map or even a web map that you can actually have produced. GIS is basically the coordinate or the position is basically the blood that keeps GIS that gives GIS that unique edge over other information systems, basically. In the humanitarian work, there are many other applications where the GIS, geospatial techniques actually applied. I'll use GIS and geospatial interchangeably. But you see that I'll give a typical example of the environmental degradation. I think for those of you who might have come across the different satellite imagery platforms that actually exist, you realize that when you have a sequence of satellite imagery that actually are taken over a given place, the same place, and over a specific period of time, you can be actually able to see the difference or the how degradation might be being applied to might actually be taking place over that specific region or that specific area. This is where remote sensing actually comes in handy. I think we just a crude example during the Cyclone Idai incident disaster that we had a few weeks back. There was a kind of a satellite imager or two, basically an application that was created by NASA, that was developed by NASA that I came across. I think I'll share the link on the comment section. You see that the tool basically allowed you to see the differences in the land for the affected areas and to see the how the drainage system was affected. In a way, you could clearly see the drainage patterns, how they actually changed during the course of the before the cyclone and after the cyclone. So you could actually monitor to estimate the kind of damage that was experienced in that area. This was one typical example of how GIS can actually be applied in humanitarian response, basically. I think more of you some of you may have actually come across a few maps that we developed, some which I developed and other partners who actually are in the humanitarian sector for the Chimani cyclone. These were just a few demonstrations of how the use of GIS, how GIS can actually be used in humanitarian work. I remember one of the first few maps that was actually made was basically just a report of the areas that were affected. That is, I think, it was just a map showing the points where they were reported to have been damaged houses, lives lost, any sort of particular report of interest that would have been useful to the civil protection unit as well as other different partners of the civil protection unit, be they medical organizations like ours, other development organizations, partners, etc., other NGOs, basically. So that map, it proved to be a very useful tool from the response that I got. I got response from many actors actually. But that goes to show how just visualizing something diagrammatically on a picture can be very different from just reading a text or a report, basically in a tabular report that can be written down. So yeah, like I said, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Then different types of map. I'll just use the Chimani incident to kind of give you the different applications where So basically, the first thing was basically when we used it as a report. Then to further aid the team that was now in the field, now that they were in the field, the next question was how do we get access into Chimanimani Chimanimani town basically, because I think for those of you who know, it was basically inaccessible all from everywhere. Basically, it was kind of cut off from the rest of the world, Chimanimani. So the next question was to determine how to access that area and also to find out the affected people or the affected populations that were affected, the estimates, the people that laid that were in the way of the flood waters, basically the people who were affected by the population. So the next question was how do we find this information? So we we mapped out all the homesteads and the areas where the settlements, basically, that is all the buildings that were inside using satellite imagery that were acquired. We mapped out all the buildings, and by use of our partners such as the OpenStreetMap volunteers, we even have one in the for the Zim chapter actually. Feel free to join it. I'll give you a few details following this. That information was mapped out and an analysis to find out where the highest density of the population could have actually been. Then you can actually overlay that information with the part of the floods and the waterways, the natural drainage system that actually exists. Because the natural drainage system kind of gives you an idea of if there's a flood, you kind of understand most likely where the water will flow, which path the water will take, because that has already been there. The drainage system to naturally follow the drainage system. It's only that it will flood and it will kind of expand the width. So once you overlay that information, then you can have an idea of how many people can be affected and which areas can be affected in a way. And it was Chimanimani, I think, was one of the best examples of demonstration of the power of GIS and how it can actually be used. That is locally. But not only that scenario. For the duration of my stay at MSF, I've been based at a WASH project, basically. That is the project which is in Harare, based in Harare, which focuses on water, sanitation, and hygiene. I'm basically working in those areas which have less access to water, and we're providing support in that regard, basically. So GIS has been very, very fundamental. It is one of the essential tools that has actually helped in the strategic decision making. The primary focus within this project was actually to determine and to help people access water. Basically, that is our main focus was underground water. That is supply of boreholes, in fact. So it wasn't necessarily drilling of balls. Of course, we had to drill some one or two balls, not necessarily one or two actually. We ended up drilling about 7 balls actually in total. So 2015 to 2018. So in that regard, the idea of how GIS actually was helping was that we needed to find out where the people actually reside in, which are the most densely populated areas, which might actually be in need of water. You need to map out where the needs are, which areas are the most impacted by the issue of lack of water within Harare. This project was focusing only on Harare, and we found that most of those areas are in the western side of Harare, basically. And our project focus was only for Budiro Glenfield, Lenora, Kwadzana, Mavukta Fara, to mention but a few areas where actually we worked as an organization. So the idea was to find out how to make how to determine which is the catchment population which would be affected by this issue of lack of drinking water, safe drinking water. So what we just did was simple. We mapped out the existing infrastructure, that is the existing balls within these areas, these suburbs, all the balls, and considering their functionality, um, when they were drilled, who drilled them, the ownership issues coming to, because at the end of the day, this water, the drinking water is supposed to be supposed to provide it to the public at the end of the day. So you need to find out how or where the water is, or where the balls, the existing infrastructure is, so that at the end of the day, that's when you can make a decision on whether you need to drill another bore, or you just simply work on the one that's existing and improve the existing system. So after doing that, we then eventually created a simple buffer for all the balls that were working. That is, the balls that were working. Then you can actually see, you have, after you do that, you have an image of the coverage, land coverage of each ball, basically. So the UN standards, the international standards, basically, they state that each person should be within about 500 meters of safe drinking water, which is basically the standard of measure and the acceptable standard of measure which we implement. And so basically the buffer should be 500 meters, was 500-meter radius. And thereafter, you now check out which are the people that are not within those 500-meter regions, basically. So then you can estimate where is the most efficient place location which you can locate your own installation and any improvement that you're going to make. And that in itself was all techniques that we actually implemented. I think for most of you are familiar with the local situation. We've been having diarrheal disease outbreaks throughout I think for as long as I can remember, we've been having recurring diarrheal disease outbreaks in specific, in certain areas of especially in Harare. So GIS basically plays a fundamental role, especially within the medical fraternity, because um, as a medical organization, you are there to support people medically, and you need to make decisions to understand, like I mentioned earlier on, you need to know how the outbreak is progressing, where should you go, because you need to also determine which populations are at risk from that outbreak, etc. So what DGS allowed us to do was to have an overview of the cases that were coming in and how they were coming in, the rate at which they were coming in, such that if you want to employ or deploy a health promotion team that should go and mitigate, or a medical team, doctors to go and to address a certain issue, then you can have an informed point of view. You kind of know where you're going to be where you're going to be, where you're going to be working to, where you're going to be supporting, etc. So the typhoid outbreaks, I recall we had another typhoid outbreak. I think for those of you who remember, it was in Guero. So this one was very special in that I recall that we were able to employ not only a cluster map of the cases. When I say cluster map, I'm saying that you're just mapping cases for a specific area, or in one, as basically you show it as one big circle. So the different size of circle it implies the different cases per specific area. So for for that particular typhoid outbreak, we were able to also make a map for the hotspot, which is basically, it was giving us point by point where we were able to map, we were able to map cases as point at specific points based on the locations of the patient, basically. So when you're able to do that, then you can actually run a density analysis to see the density of where the most where most of the cases located, and which is the hotspot of that specific outbreak, basically, and you can apply your strategies within that at that specific location. When you have a density of, you can also, when you have the density of these points, then you can also overlay that information with other specific information like the causes of disease, like accessibility to water, etc., etc. Then you can make your decisions to find out that you can find out the link between all the cases, and not only the geographical pattern, etc. But you can just use it as part of the decision-making process to make better aided decisions. Like I said, GIS is just but a tool. It's not the end result. It's just a means to an end at the end of the day. Okay. I think for those of you who remember, last year, should have been last year actually, we had the HPV vaccination campaign that was started by MOH, and fortunately enough, as an organization and also as an individual, I was able to take part and apply the GIS skills within that area. Just to give you a brief background, this vaccination campaign was focusing on schools, basically, a specific age group that was still in schools, and these people were, so basically what the vaccination team was just going to be doing was going to be taking a tour of all the schools within that district where we were doing the vaccination in Gutu district. So that's about 256 schools basically that you needed to plan for a vaccination campaign, and all of that had to be done in about 9 days actually. So the issue of logistics now comes in handy because you need to make sure that whatever path you're going to follow, it's going to be very fuel efficient. You're going to save time, and you're going to plan your route in such a manner that you don't go past the school, then you come back. You're just going to do it sweep. You're going to sweep across the whole district in an efficient manner without skipping any schools within, because 256 at the end of the day is too huge a number to cram by head. So eventually what we just did was we took the locations of all the schools that are within the district. Then we initiated the missing maps mapathon for updating the roads within that district, basically. So I think I'll explain more about missing maps, etc. How these partners actually help and can help the GIS growth within Zimbabwe. That's the last part of my presentation. So what we just did was we did that the route analysis using that information that we'd acquired of the locations of the schools. Then we planned also the different times that, because we knew that each team most likely, typically a team would leave the base with two common bases within the district. So each team would leave a specific base point. It would be one ball point. So they would leave at that point, then they would come back in the evening to sleep at that point. So each team would leave that base point at a specific time, and let's say 6 o'clock in the morning. Then they'll travel to a specific school. Then they'll go and they would typically in a day, they would need to carry out the vaccination campaign for about 5 schools in a day. Then they'll return to the school. Then they'll return to the base at a specific time. So route analysis was very, very critical in that exercise. So what would happen is that we created maps, daily maps for the team that they could actually use. They go out in the field, which would just show the number of the routes that they were supposed to take and the road network, basically, which they were supposed to use, and the order which they were supposed to follow. Each day it was given on a day-to-day, it was published on a day-to-day basis, so that the team could, at the end of the day, the team could carry out the work very efficiently and it would save on fuel. So that was a very much practical example of something that I learned at school, and it was being applied in the field, and I was actually applying it. So GIS is very, very handy, and it's proving to be something that that can be used in almost everywhere, can be applied in almost everywhere. Just of recently, we are planning actually to there's it's actually underway project of improving the water supply in Matapi, Harare, Bare Matapi actually. And fortunately enough, I'm part of the team that's actually working there. So the idea GIS came in handy in that when we drilled, we needed to find out the best point to drill points. This time is when I think the example that I gave previously was that we're using existing balls. That's the one which we worked with. But in this time around, we had to drill new balls. So the locating of these balls actually, it was kind of a merge of the application of GIS into geology, because what we did was that we had to first map out the lineaments, that is those fractures along the Earth's crust, where we could most probably find water, because along those lineaments, that's most likely that's where you're going to find underground water. Then after that, you carry out a geological survey of or geotechnical survey, basically of that point of that, because you zone down to that specific point. Then you can select the site. You site the place where you're actually going to drill your specific balls. And we actually had 100% success when we applied in this methodological manner. And before we even laid out the infrastructure as well, we actually drew a plan of the specific area. And basically, I'll just give you a snapshot of the idea. The idea is that the water will come from the bores and it will be stored in a specific tank. Then it will flow through gravitation and it will be supplied to the residents. So the idea of height, the position comes into context now. Because I think this was one of the few times where we had to actually implement a land surveying equipment to work with for that particular project, basically. So I think these rough examples will just give you an idea that, honestly speaking, GIS is something that's usable in almost every facet of humanitarian work, be it's a development context or it's an emergency-based organization like ourselves, be it a development project. I know of a colleague who works with another development-like organization. I think it's Oxfam. Where they actually are implementing GIS. They recently took up GIS within their structures, and it's I know and understand that the GIS is actually moving their work forward, and it's making work easier at the end of the day because you make informed decisions. Throughout the time that I've been within the humanitarian circles, I've realized this. I think I'll stop with the examples there, but I'll just go to the one of the things that I've actually come across is that there is still a low representation of geospatial practitioners within the humanitarian fraternity. Locally, Zimbabwe, from the Zimbabwean context, there's still, I wouldn't want to say low uptake, but maybe it's not necessarily being totally embraced as it should be, because at the end of the day, it's a tool that anyone can actually use and adapt to his own industry at the end of the day. Even from the finance guys, you need to find out where your markets are. You need to define who your potential markets are, and see also the geographical positioning. You need to find out where you're going to, how you're going to carry out a marketing strategy at the end of the day. So I really believe that GIS can be applied in almost any industry, basically. So like I was saying, I've noticed that one of the small challenges that I've found out is that there is not so much penetration of GIS within the humanitarian and emergency planning. Sometimes it actually comes more of as an afterthought, basically, after decisions have already been made, and that it should be basically a tool that should initiate how decisions can be taken, and it should point towards the direction in which a decision should actually take, based on the facts and reports that have actually come from the fields. That's the beauty of GIS. And I think this is one area where we lack, maybe as a locally, as a community here in Zimbabwe, I would say, because in the humanitarian sector, there's still very few organizations, I would say, that actually have adopted and embraced the technology to use it within their own work. So I think that's one area where we actually need to actually improve. Okay, I see a question here. What were I think this Taurai Mandiri, the question of the challenges that you encountered in using GIS for some of the projects that you take part in. I think the first challenge that I came across, like I said, this is a medical institute and it's a medical organization, basically. The first challenge that you come across is that as much as you're actually just going to come in as a specialist, you are going to be more of playing a supporting role. Now, the issue of supporting is that you need to make sure that the people are well vexed of your capabilities and of your abilities and what you could do to improve their work, basically. So whilst you're already practicing and you're already a geospatial specialist, you need to also be an evangelist of how GIS can actually be used in the different aspects of people. I'm surrounded by medical professions mainly. The people of medical background, they're the ones who actually surround me here as I speak. But the first challenge that I got was basically to try and draw their attention into finding out how the products that I make and could be of actually good use to their work, and how they can aid their decision making process to make better decisions, to make more with decisions with facts, basically. So how I approached this was basically, the first and foremost was to be an evangelist at the end of the day, to evangelize on how we could use GIS. So the idea was to see, to this basically was made up of holding training sessions. Like I remember the last time I went with a team. I remember doing actually a map reading training sessions, because I'll just give you a small example, stupid one though. Initially, when you come to the meeting, you make a map, you present that map before, or rather, you have an agenda of a meeting, then you develop something, a tool that can be used. Maybe it's just a map, a small paper map that can be used to answer some of the questions that will be asked, obviously, that you can foretell that these questions will be asked when you're in the meeting. So you come with the map, then you present to the team. So the team will say, this is quite a nice map. Okay, looks beautiful. Then they'll give you back the map. So the map was not necessarily my map. It was supposed to actually be their map. So when I realized this, the first question, so it led me to identify that the only need was that we are of different backgrounds and we have been trained from different institutes, etc. So the first things first was to just do a simple basic map training. I think when I just did that, people were able to now start interpreting the data that's actually been presented on a map. I think for all of you, you admit here, you understand that one of the most primary output that you get from GIS is a map, geographical presentation of that data, graphical presentation of that information, pictorial presentation, basically. So that's basically the basic thing that you. So once I started doing that, then it led to other avenues being opened. Then now you can talk of mobile application development, etc. The data tools that we use. I think that's where actually I'm going to the kind of workflow, the tools that we use in the humanitarian sector. You realize that since the humanitarian sector is basically a non-profit making industry, most of the stuff is going to be the financial issue is going to come in. The question is always going to come in. So you can't really afford to have those slick type of instruments unless when very necessary, like the case which I mentioned for the Mbare Matapi project, which I explained a few minutes ago. So you see that the issue of data now, the tools that you use, you're going to, as much as possible, you're going to try to implement tools that are very cost effective. So for my part, you find out that we always, I think, like for most other geospatial specialists, we make use of humanitarian or open data kits. I think you're all aware of the ODK tools, the ODK platform, etc. Stuff that is open source, that is free, and the GPS unit is not easy. We for our purposes, for the purposes of our activities, the accuracy, it has to be maximum, but at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be costly to acquire the location of a point accurately of that of with high precision, and at the end of the day, it should be cheap. So I think for our purposes, plus between 3 and 5 meter accuracy, positional accuracy, is something that it's quite usable for the humanitarian work. It's very good. So that's why we actually make use of mobile data collection tools, MDCs. That's the abbreviation that we have. So that like the smartphone applications, those ones, they always pop in here and there. The ODKs, those always pop in here and there. We make use of one Kobo Collect. OpenStreetMap is one of those tools that is very essential, and other satellite imagery tools that actually like the USGD. I don't know. I usually mix up that that acronym. USGS. I think that's how that's the acronym. The remote sensing that's actually available free online. Like for example, you notice that the DEM for a place, it doesn't really change over time, but maybe the vegetative imagery showing vegetation, etc. That's the one that usually changes. But for issues like DM, etc., we try as much as possible to use the cost effective and very cheap, and yet of good quality. Shouldn't be cheap and very low quality. No, it should be cheap, but also have good quality for us to be able to get good and meaningful results at the end of the day. So so the issue now that we make use of open data, issue of open data standard is something that you would always want to make sure that you keep yourself transparent in that manner. Data should, I personally believe, data should be shared. There is no reason basically to hide or to keep data. I think the only way that data can be improved is basically when it's shared. That's my own belief, my own opinion as a person. So I think this is one other challenge that I've come across in carrying out our work. Like you realize that where at times, I think that's one thing that affects most geospatial practitioners out there is the lack of information and lack of data. You see, in Zimbabwe, it's not very easy sometimes to acquire geographical data, just per se, unless maybe it's on platforms like OpenStreetMap, etc. Yeah, maybe you can get it there. But geospatial data, sometimes meaningful other level, high level data, is not that easy to acquire, unless maybe if you're very much connected in one way or the other. So I think it's one area, it's one challenge that we always come across each and every day. But You always have to find a way of working around it. Either you're going to the field to collect it, but like I said, why do you have to recreate the wheel when it's already created once? I think this challenge can always be solved by once we have more geo portals or repositories that we can actually store geographical information, which can be accessed by people from all sectors, be they students, academic from the academic world, the professional bodies, the professional GIS, the even engineering firms, etc. Those profit-making organizations. If we could have one repository which we could have that can store this information on an easily accessible place, I think we would be, our geospatial industry could be, will definitely move forward. Because as of late, like I said, I think there's still little penetration of this skill within the different industries that we have in our country. I think one thing that I've quickly noticed is that there's little community or networks of geospatial practitioners. Actually, I think ZIG is one of the few that actually exist, as well as SIZ, which both of which I'm also a member of. But I think also we need to go a step further also to incorporate other movements such as even OpenStreetMap team. We actually have one that we have initially just a few weeks back. I think we moved towards the creating and establishing an OpenStreetMap Zimbabwe chapter that can actually be of use, especially to the humanitarian sector, which to during times of crisis, especially like demonstrated during the Cyclone Idai incident, because like these organizations, they might not necessarily be organizations, but they're just basically a team of volunteers who actually are prepared to offer their support by just mapping and providing location of position of things, information that is geo-referenced basically. So, for example, the incidents of some, maybe we have many other platforms that actually I know they are more crowdsourcing tools with the Smart Harare initiative, which has proved very useful because the data is actually there, it's available for everyone, and any geospatial scientist can actually make use of that information. And at the end of the day, you can actually use it to depending to your own skill and to your own knowledge at the end of the day. So these challenges, I think, they can really be addressed if there's data can easily be accessible. Most of the data, geographical data, is not that it's not there. Some of it is there, but it's just that it's not. It might not be accessible to everyone. It might be sitting in offices and might be hard copy or something. Some of this data should just, I think, can be of more use if it is just digitized and it can be accessible and is available to everyone, be it even at a cost or a minimum cost. Because at the end of the day, it will improve the industry by see, when the data is improved, then it can be more useful to everyone else who can actually be making use of that information. Then I think from all that I've said, I know, and I'm actually commending the recent amendment and the adoption of GIS, not only at the higher level, at tertiary level, but I really commend the idea of having GIS as part of the skills that people actually imparted in, even at the lower level, secondary. This is one of the best move that I think is something that will help evangelize the importance of being aware of the necessity of having people who are geo aware. They can actually analyze and understand the importance of 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 their position, the importance of positional data, as important as other data actually is. the positional aspect of data, it brings a totally new dimension of things. When you can analyze data from the positional point of view, when you can georeference a specific report, then you can be able to actually establish the other relationships and make tie-ins and to come up with a complete story of actually how things actually occur. So I think this one of the first network is one of the first initiatives is this the Xavier Institute of Zimbabwe as well as the ZIG. These are guys I would commend them for doing a great job in taking up the initiative of making sure that GIS is something that will grow, and I can foretell that within a few years at this specific rate that we're moving at, GIS is going to be moving beyond boundaries, and it's at the end of the day, everyone is going to be GI aware. I always have this question, adopted it from somewhere, but it says the answer is GIS. What is your question? So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll end this short, longish broadcast of mine. Thank you very much for your time and for your ears. I hope all the questions I've answered all the questions. I think I'll just post the link which I promised to post on this just below. You can check on the comment section. Thank you very much for your time, guys. Bye.